Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this very awkward hybrid virtual reality world. We're really excited to be here this morning with you all, and we're really excited to have Danny with us. Just really quick before we get started, I have put a few things in the chat box that are just going on here at KCAC. We currently have a call for art for our upcoming members show. So if you are an artist member of KCAC, we're doing our Art for All show in November. And so you can now submit a piece through our website. It's totally free to apply. It's non-juried. If you submit, you will be in the show. It's a really, really fun show of small works. And yeah, we're happy to have an opportunity to feature all of our members. The next link is for an information session we will be doing virtually next Wednesday evening at 6:30. And this is an info session that we're teaming with the Parade of Hearts on. I don't know if you guys have heard about this upcoming event. It kind of came out of nowhere. And I know a lot of us and a lot of artists we work with have been really skeptical about it. Like, what is this thing? How do I do it? And so we got a lot of information for them. It's actually a really great opportunity for artists. And so we're really happy to help spread the word and help you guys out with your applications next Wednesday evening. So try to join that if you can. If not, you can always email us and ask us any questions you have about it. And we will be recording that info session, so you can even watch it after. And then the last link here is one of our board members, dear to us and local artist, Shelly Pinter, will be presenting about her creative career on August 26th. I think right now it's supposed to be scheduled for an in-person event here in the KCAC gallery. It's presented by Gilded, and yeah, she's just going to be giving an informal lecture talk about her creative career. So if you want to join that also. Here we go. A few more people are rolling in. Okay, so also this morning, Danny is going to be here with us and talking. And we're just going to do Q&A as she goes. So if you have questions, feel free to politely unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat box and I can mediate that. So yeah, don't be shy. You're here for a reason this morning. So definitely ask Danny questions. She is a genius and incredible resource for us in Kansas City. So we're really excited to have her here. And she is with the Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. KCVLAA is a nonprofit organization that provides legal and accounting assistance to qualifying artists and arts organizations from all creative disciplines. Their Art Smarts program provides seminars in arts law to help artists avoid common pitfalls in their professional arts careers. We've been partnering with them for a couple years now, and they've been really making such a huge impact with our artist members and across the local arts scene. And so we're really just excited to have Danny here, and she can share their services with us today. So welcome, Danny. I'll let you kind of take it from here a little bit.
Hi, I'm Danny Merrick. Sorry I'm not there in person. For those of you that are in person. I actually currently have strep throat. So if I start like kind of coughing or sounding hoarse, it's not COVID, it's strep throat. Because I have 6 kids and 6 kids are germ factories and you end up with strep throat. So I had made plans to be there in person, but then I was like, nobody wants these germs. So I'm going to stay at home and be in the comfort of my living room and have my water nearby. So I'm the executive director of the Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. Some of you may have worked with me in the past or have worked with an organization in the past. I've been the executive director for about 11 years now. In that time, we've seen, as an organization, we've seen a lot more demand for our services over that time period. And I think part of that has been because the community as a whole has started to have a lot more recognition of the need to support artists and the benefit that artists provide to the economic community and to our environment as a whole. And also, I think we've had some increased awareness over the last 11 years about the types of services that we can provide. So I'm going to bring up our website in case you haven't seen it, just so that you can see it. Jessica put it in the text box, but I will bring up my website just so you can see it. Our website is old school. We actually were in the process of raising funds to renovate it. And we started that process in February of 2020. And then you can guess what happened. Then the pandemic hit. And so our website hasn't been updated since, like, had a major overhaul since 2011. So, you know, it looks like a 2011 website. But the main key things that you as consumers may want to know about where to find stuff on this website are the join, the apply, and the workshops. So Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts has a membership-based system, but we do not require you to be a member to take advantage of our services. So you can still receive services if you never become a member. Membership is not limited, or services are not limited to just membership. What a membership provides for you is it's giving you a calendar year worth of, you can come to any workshops that we put on for free. If there's any admission fee associated with them, our members get in free. And then we also give you one free application for services a year. An application for service has a fee associated with it, so we waive that fee for our members. In pre-pandemic times, when we were doing a lot more in-person events that were ticketed or admission-based events, you could easily pay for the membership just by attending a couple of ticketed events and using free services. You will have already used up, you would have gotten your value out of the membership at that point. With online events, which are largely unticketed at this point, it's kind of a, you're giving us a donation because you're probably going to have difficulty getting your value back in terms of ticket fees waived and things like that. So that's part of the reason that we don't require membership for services. But that tab is here if you ever want to join. It lists out the different types of membership and then gives you the opportunity to click on any of these and join as a membership. Apply is the other tab that'll be interesting for you. Apply is if you know that you need legal or accounting services and you are ready to have the step taken where you're going to apply for services with us, and we're actually going to refer you out to a volunteer attorney or accountant to assist with your legal or accounting issues for free. There's an application fee, but then you're not responsible for any other additional fees for any of the services they provide. If they have a court fee or a government administrative fee, you do have to pay those, but you're not going to have to pay the attorney or the accountant for any of the time that they spend on those particular things. The applications are listed by the type of organization that you are, and each one of these is a hyperlink. The application, I get a lot of applications that just come without me ever having talked to whoever sent in the application. I recommend that you at least maybe have a conversation with me before you send in your application. The only reason I suggest that is that I frequently find that we've got one of two reasons that talking to me might be useful. One, sometimes what you actually need answered is what I call a quick and dirty question. Like, it's something that I could probably answer for you over the phone. It's going to take 10 or 15 minutes of our time. You're going to go away with the answer and you can go do whatever you want to do. And you're not going to have to send in an application fee, wait a few weeks for me to find a volunteer for you, etc. I could just answer the question for you over the phone, quick and dirty. The other reason is that sometimes people will apply and they actually have a bunch of legal issues or a bunch of accounting issues. And the way that we assign our cases is we assign them one issue for one attorney or one issue for one accountant. So if you submit an application that has 6 issues on it, I'm going to tell you, well, that's technically 6 applications. It's not 1 application. And the reason that we do that is that lawyers are like doctors. We specialize. So you wouldn't go to your foot doctor if you were having a heart attack, because your foot doctor is going to go, I don't know why you're here, go to the ER. And it's the same way for lawyers. If you come to me and you have an intellectual property question, or you have a business question, I can answer it. But if you have a family law question, or an employment law question, or a question related to unemployment law, like you didn't get your unemployment stuff, I may not be able to answer that because that's not an area of law that I specialize in. So if I get an application that has a bunch of different issues on it, I basically have to go back to you and say, okay, I need you to pick which one's most important. And sometimes my experience is that that is actually difficult for you as artists, not because you're stupid or not because you don't, aren't capable of making a decision, but more because you're not looking at it the same way that a lawyer would look at it. And so I can look at those 6 issues with you, and I can have a conversation with you and say, all right, this little one down here that you think is not all that important, that actually will upset all these other things. And so that should be the thing we work on, and that should be the thing that we have you address first. And these other little things in some respect are going to get addressed by you doing this one thing. And I always tell my clients all the time, when they feel kind of, I don't know, embarrassed, or they feel like they're like, I should have known that. No, you shouldn't have known that. You shouldn't have necessarily known that at all. I mean, I went to 3 years of law school and another half year after that to complete both a law degree and a master's of law in taxation. And I can tell you, when I went into law school, I didn't know most of that stuff. And so unless you have, for some reason, been exposed to that information, there's no reason for you to know it. An average person conducting their life out in the world does not have to know the insane amount of mundane minutia that I have to know about stuff related to the law. So, I always say what my grandparents always said, which is that stupid is forever, but ignorance can be fixed. So, if you just don't know something, you're just ignorant of it, and that's fine. And I don't have a problem with that. So the other thing that you might want to look for on here is the workshops link. If you like seeing things in a calendar setup like this, but if you aren't, like, you're like, I don't care that I have to see it in a calendar, always on our homepage, there is this tab bar in the right-hand side where it's going to show our upcoming events, and then there'll be a link to the different events. So for example, this next event has the link where you can register right here. And then there's a link to the Facebook event down here. If you were to copy and paste this to register for this event, it's going to bring up a page that looks like this. So this is actually our event we have going on next Thursday. So next Thursday, we do this particular event every 3rd Thursday of the month. And before the pandemic, we were doing them in person. Right now, we're doing them all virtually. At some point, we might get back to doing them with an in-person component. I teach at UMKC School of Law as well, and I run a clinic for low-income entrepreneurs. And I am kind of the opinion that this hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting thing is probably here to stay. Like, I have certain clients that they only have a lunch break in which they can meet with me. And when you add in 20 minutes of drive time on either end of that, well, now they can't meet with me, right? And so my suspicion is that at some point, this will turn into sort of a hybrid where the appointments will either be in person or online at the consumer's choice. For right now, we're still doing them online. In June, July, I started kind of toying with the idea that maybe we would start doing them in person in the fall, and then Delta. And so I'm like, we're just going to hang off on that for a while and see where this goes. So I would be surprised if we're doing them even in a hybrid in-person format before the spring, but who knows? But just to put that out there. So what this event is that every third Thursday of the month, we do 45-minute free consultations, and they're completely free. It doesn't matter what your income level is. All the requirement is that it has to be art or art related. And those are 45-minute consultations with legal and accounting professionals as needed, to talk about whatever you want that's art or arts related. I attend them every single time. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years at this point. And so I'm not only a lawyer, but I also have a master's of law and taxation. So I have a strong background in basic accounting and tax planning and tax management for businesses and artists. So a lot of times what I can answer a lot of the accounting questions too, is kind of what I'm getting at. And so I'm there all the time, but then we have a rotating kind of cast of characters who will participate in those as well, especially when we're in person. And it's 45 minutes to talk about whatever you want. I love this format. I love this format for a few reasons. First, it's a great place to get a bunch of quick and dirty questions answered. So like if you've got like 10 kind of, I know that these are silly, but I've looked these up on the Google and everything's kind of contradictory and I just don't really know what to do. A lot of times that's a great way to get a lot of those questions answered because it's just 45 minutes of your time. And so we can answer those questions. So I really like that. The other reason I really like this format is that it gets me an opportunity to meet with artists and start to see their whatever project they're working on develop more comprehensively. So I have a lot of artists who repeat at these sessions from month to month. So I might see someone in August at a session, and then maybe in September they come back, and then I don't hear from them for a couple of months, and then they come back in like January, and I can kind of see their progression, and I can kind of guide them over a course of a period of time and say, okay, well, now that you've done this, well, now let's maybe have you address this issue or whatever. And then the other reason that I love it is that unlike our applications, which require that you be at or below certain income guidelines to qualify for free services, this has no qualification. Now, I mean, if you were like Bill Gates or somebody and you walked in, I might be like, Bill, come on, really, get your own lawyer. I mean, I don't think you need free 45-minute consultations. But beyond that, I'm not going to ask you anything about your income level. So if you're someone who, when you look at the income level requirements on our webpage for applications and you know that you can't meet them, you're above them, this gives you an opportunity to get legal questions answered without having to go call an attorney and set up a consultation somewhere. And so I like that we can meet the needs of the population that, because a lot of the volunteer lawyers for the arts have this ongoing battle where since we have to get volunteers from the local community that are lawyers to volunteer with us, they get their feelings mangled if they feel like we are potentially helping clients who would have paid them. And their perception of who will pay them and my perception of who will pay them are kind of like this. So we have to kind of like, we're in this weird position where we have to kind of negotiate our service window as to where that they don't get upset feeling like we're taking away potential paying clients. I personally think our income levels are artificially low for that. I feel like our income levels could be higher, but our income levels are in line with all of the Midwestern, like all the Midwestern volunteer lawyers and accountants for the arts in our region, really, with similar size populations. And so it's a hard sell for me to get our income guidelines raised. But that means that there's a whole swath of the population who are not they're making too much money to qualify for our services, but they're not actually making enough money to be able to pay an attorney anywhere from $150 to $450 an hour to talk to them. And so this gives me an opportunity to meet with clients and kind of fill some of that need where they wouldn't have been able to have received services otherwise. Examples of things that you can do in these consultations. It doesn't have to just be you come to me with questions and I answer questions. I've had several situations where someone brings me a contract or they send it to me over email a few days before we meet, and I actually mark it up for them. And we'll mark up the contract, and then in that 45 minutes, I discuss, I share my screen if we're doing it virtual, and I say, well, here's why I think you want to change this, and here's what I would change it to, and here's why I think you're getting totally screwed if you sign it with this in it. And so, I mean, those are the types of things I've done, licensing agreements or gallery consignment agreements or any number of work for hire agreements. There's been any, like where you're an independent contractor, I've reviewed any number of agreements like that, both where the contracts were something that the artist was being asked to sign, or it was something that the artist was wanting to give out to somebody else to sign. And so that's an example of one of the types of other services beyond just you come with questions and I answer questions. Other things that I've done in those sessions is I've had clients who were like, I need to file my annual report with the Secretary of State. Like maybe they have a nonprofit or they have a corporation or something. And they're like, and I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, that's cool. We'll bring it up and I will literally walk you through it step by step. I've done the same thing for nonprofits who have needed to file their 990 with the Internal Revenue Service. Literally just walk them through it. I have walked people through the 1023-EZ application, which is the application to apply for tax exempt status with the IRS. We've pulled it up, literally walked them through it so that they could submit it that day. So be open-minded about what we can and can't accomplish in those meetings. The only thing you're bound by is it's 45 minutes long. And it has to be art or arts related. I've helped people like look at their QuickBooks accounts. I mean, there's been all number of things that I've done. So it can be pretty broad and it can be a way to get some of those things answered for you. So when you go on to this, if you haven't used this type of application before, the time slots are listed. And so you can click on a time slot, confirm, and then it's going to ask you for a bunch. Mostly the only information that it's asking you for is your name, your email address, a phone number, and then some questions to try to give us a little bit of a heads up about what your problem is or what your question is. And the reason that we need that information is, again, we're going back to lawyer specialized. So if I see that and I look at it and I go, oh, whoa, that is way outside my wheelhouse. If I'm in that meeting, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. I need to go find someone who can take 45 minutes out of their day to meet with this particular artist to try and answer these questions. So the more information you can give me about what it is that you're hoping to get some answers with, the easier it is for me to find someone who's actually going to be able to answer your questions. So that's the purpose of the questions that are associated with that when you register. Does anybody have any questions so far? I feel like I'm just like.
Yeah, definitely speak up, guys. We have this incredible resource here this morning. So if you have anything, like there are no stupid questions,
And I'm fine. I'm totally fine with what if I questions.
Yeah.
What's the name of the organization again?
It's Kansas City Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. It's KCVLAA.
Okay.
We also have a Facebook page, and we post our events on the Facebook page. We also occasionally post articles of interest. If we know about calls for artists, like if somebody sends us, like if KCAC or Interurban Art House or whoever says, hey, there's this call for artists coming up, you should post it. I just post it so that there's a reach for if there's calls for artists, or if I find out about different grants that are available for artists, etc. I usually try to post those up on the Facebook page. So if you're a person who uses Facebook, my page is not super active. It's not like I'm posting 20 things a day because, oh my God, who has time for that? I'm not a professional social media relations person, but I try to at least post things that are actually applicable and pertinent to artists on there. And all of our events are listed there too. So like if you can't remember our website, you can always like look up our Facebook page and you can link to our events, and our website's linked to there as well.
That's perfect. We have a question from Ada. Do we need to be a member of KCVLAA or Interurban Art House to do the consultations?
No. No, you do not. Both KCAC and Interurban Art House, when we set up these consultations initially and we were doing them in person, we did not make it so that you had to be a member of anything. And the reason is that not so much for Interurban, but more so for KCAC. With KCAC being closer to the urban core, I wanted to especially make sure that there was plenty of room for people who just literally walked in off the street, didn't even know what was going on, and happened to have an art or arts related question and wanted to participate. And so that's one of the reasons I've never required membership to participate in any of these things. And that's part of the reason also we don't require membership for any of our services, is that I don't want to bar the ability for people to participate and interface with us because of some kind of monetary issue. So I try to make it as easy as possible by not having membership be a requirement. For the consultations, especially since we're not doing them in person right now, we do require you to make an appointment through this webpage that's up right now. And that's only because for one thing, I can't run 2 Zoom calls at once myself. I have not yet mastered the ability to clone myself and be able to do more than one thing at a time. But then also we always required appointments. Predominantly, we encouraged appointments when we were doing in person. We would allow some level of walk-in, but we really wanted people to have appointments, is because we're also trying to maintain your confidentiality. And so if you're meeting one-on-one with an attorney, when we're in person, like at KCAC, we usually, there's the wall kind of behind all of you people that are sort of sitting there, like the little half wall. We were usually set up at a table kind of behind that to try to keep us, to try to keep some of the level of confidentiality occurring. And so when there's appointments, then it's not like, oh, we had 5 people show up at 10 o'clock and now we need to spread out somewhere in this space in 5 different spaces and try to keep confidentiality. So we're trying to make it so that you feel comfortable freely expressing what your issues are, knowing that those are going to be kept in confidence, even though we're in a publicly open space. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes.
Let's see. I was going to show you our Facebook page really quick, just so you know what it looks like. Of course, I have to find it myself.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I run a nonprofit organization. We are essentially a nonprofit LLC. I am wondering what kind of protections does the LLC afford our board of directors? Or should we look into D&O insurance? Or
Are you?
Go ahead.
Is it a Missouri or a Kansas-based nonprofit organization?
Missouri.
Did you say Missouri? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Missouri.
So, but your corporate structure is a limited liability company?
Yeah.
Did you say yes? I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm back there, so.
Oh, that's all right. It's distorted just enough that I'm like, I want to make sure.
Right.
So Missouri is better than Kansas in this respect, in that Missouri has put their nonprofit corporation law. So if you're a nonprofit corporation, this is where it gets a little dicey because you're an LLC.
Mhm.
If it's a nonprofit corporation, the nonprofit corporation law has sufficient statutory protection for the board and officers and directors through the nonprofit corporation law that, in my opinion, and I'll give you the caveat in a second, but my opinion is a little bit different than maybe someone who you would talk to at like Polsinelli or Stinson at a big law firm, and I'll tell you why in a second. My opinion is that if you are in Missouri and you have a nonprofit corporation, you probably really don't need to buy directors and officers insurance.
Okay.
Now, a limited liability company doesn't have that same language in it to protect a nonprofit corporation. Now, there would be, if for any reason your board of directors or officers was sued, whatever attorney was representing you guys is going to then make the argument that because you are taxed as a nonprofit corporation and recognized as a nonprofit corporation, that that element of nonprofit corporation law should apply to you, because even though you have a limited liability company title, you're functioning under the nonprofit corporation laws. And that's the only part that would be a little dicey, because that's going to be up to a judge or a jury's interpretation as to whether or not they believe that those other set of laws should apply to your limited liability company. And so that's the only caveat with that. Generally speaking, the argument that you should be treated as a nonprofit corporation despite being an LLC is usually successful. I'm just warning you that it's not as much of a slam dunk as if you were just actually a nonprofit corporation.
Okay.
So the caveat that I give is why my opinion is different than someone who's at Polsinelli or Stinson or whatever. Polsinelli, Stinson, all of those places, they do excellent work, not bashing their work in the slightest. The biggest problem with all of these big firms is they're working with nonprofit corporations that have $3, $4, $5, $6, $10 million budgets. So for them to drop $5 or $6, $7, $8, $10,000 on nonprofit board and directors officers insurance, it's a drop in the bucket. Well, when you're a nonprofit that has a budget of $10,000, dropping $6,000 on directors and officers insurance is not really feasible. So my experience is that since I work with pretty much only nonprofits that have budgets under $500,000, I look at things from a much more of a risk analysis, pro and con standpoint than someone who's going to work in Polsinelli or something like that. Someone who's going to work in Polsinelli, their entire goal is to protect the asset by any means necessary. And so they're going to say, yeah, absolutely. If you went to Polsinelli and asked this question, they're saying, yeah, you should just buy directors and officers insurance, because they're not going to think about the fact that it's a third of your budget to do so. They're not used to having that conversation. They're just used to doing we have to protect the asset at all costs. And so I always am looking at it more from a cost benefit of an analysis and going, what's really practical here? What makes the most sense in this situation? Does it make sense to be spending this money? Are they already adequately protected? The reason I asked whether you were in Missouri or Kansas is because Kansas is stupid. And I live in Kansas, so I can say that. And Kansas does not divide their nonprofit law from their for-profit law. So there is really nothing in there that's giving specific statutory protection to the board and officers and directors in nonprofit corporations in Kansas. And so for Kansas nonprofits, I'm always saying, once it becomes economically feasible, you should buy officers and directors insurance. Missouri, I feel a lot more comfortable saying, there's a big old statute in here that really clearly protects you if you're a nonprofit corporation in Missouri.
Okay, all right. Deborah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Danielle, does your advice change if the corporation has not been granted nonprofit status by the IRS?
Like 501c3?
Yeah, so if it's a nonprofit corporation that has a budget of $2,500 or less, it's automatically tax exempt. Generally, the IRS kind of was like, oh, they kind of look at that as an unassociated corporation. They a lot of times just kind of are like, we're not bothering with that. If it's got a larger budget than that, if you're a nonprofit corporation and it's been more than 27 months since you've been in formation and you have not applied for or been granted tax exempt status, you should technically be paying corporate taxes, which means that if you aren't paying corporate taxes, that directors and officers insurance isn't going to really solve that problem, because you've already committed a tax problem. You've created a tax evasion problem by not paying corporate taxes. The protection of the directors, officers, and directors and officers and board should be the same level of protection statutorily, regardless of your tax exempt status. It's whether or not you're recognized as a nonprofit corporation. But you basically have a 27-month grace period from the time that you have been formed as a nonprofit corporation to getting tax exempt status, where if you don't file corporate taxes in that time space, they kind of are going, okay, they're trying to get tax exempt status. They're working on that. We're going to kind of let it slide because it's probably going to be retroactive anyway. If it's beyond that time period, I would strongly suggest at that point that you either get a fiscal sponsor, which means that then your fiscal sponsor is how you're essentially running your money. You're running your money through your fiscal sponsor. They're doing the tax reporting for you. Or you dissolve your nonprofit corporation because you don't want to have to be subject to corporate income tax if you're never going to plan on attempting to get tax exempt status from the IRS. Did that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Did I miss anything yet?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it better for a organization to be a 501c3 or a 501c6 if it's a member organization?
Okay, first question would be, let's define member. When you're saying it's a member organization, do those members elect the board of directors?
No.
What do they get by being members?
Can you chime in on this, Angie?
They get the ability to exhibit in the gallery. There's exhibition, there's education, basically full access to our space, and gosh, what else?
Okay, regardless, what you're describing so far is, I'm going to cheapen it by the way that I say this, but it's not a values judgment. It's just a shorthand explanation. What you're describing is basically advertising and drumming up business by having members versus having the legal definition of members. So when the law looks at members, when I use that word as a lawyer, that generally means that the members have some legal authority or responsibility for the direction and operation of the organization. When they don't, it's basically a giant advertising thing. And so, like my members of KCVLAA, you don't get to hire me. You don't get to fire me. You don't get to decide who's on the board of directors. You don't get to decide what kind of programming we're doing. I mean, you can offer input, but you don't get to vote on it, right? And so it's a marketing thing. It's hey, if you give us X number of dollars to become a member, you get these special perks. It's like like I listen to NPR, and if I give them enough money, I'm going to get a really cool coffee mug, right? Or I'm going to get a tote bag. Or if I'm lucky, I'm going to get a Tiny Desk t-shirt, and that would be pretty banging. But, I mean, but I don't get to go sit in on their board meeting and vote their officers in. So the question about being a 501c3 versus a 501c6 doesn't hinge on whether or not, in this instance, whether or not you have members. What it's hinging on is whether or not what you're doing is charitable. So a 501c3 is something you would be doing that is charitable. A 501c6 is more like it doesn't have a charitable component. It's more like a promotional, it's more like a business league or a chamber of commerce or an association of professionals in like pipe fitters 101 or the American Bar Association or things like that. So it's more going to hinge on whether or not you are charitable. And based on what you've said so far, I can't actually determine if what you're doing is charitable or not. I will tell you that one of the things that the IRS consistently will tell you is not charitable is if the situation is one in which it's almost like a co-op, where artists are paying for membership, and then that gives them the right to hang in your galleries where their works are for sale. Because then the argument is that you're really just a for-profit. You're allowing a gallery space that has work for artists for sale, and you're not a charitable endeavor because your primary thing is to sell artists' work. So if it's that kind of situation where it's more like a gallery and less like a museum, is the easiest way I can kind of put them on the spectrum. The closer you are to I'm a gallery and artists are being paid because their work is being bought because they're displaying here, versus I'm displaying artist work and the work is, my primary purpose is not to sell the work. My primary purpose is to promote arts and culture in the environment I'm in. That's where you decide whether or not you're charitable. It's in that space is where that's decided.
That's
And
the best explanation I've ever heard. So,
oh, good.
yeah, sorry I interrupted. I thought you were wrapping up, but that is extremely helpful. So, thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get a lot of artists or arts groups that approach me with what is essentially a co-op model, wanting it to be nonprofit because they're saying, well, we're not making money on it. The IRS does not care if you are making money or not. Nonprofits are allowed to make money. In fact, we want nonprofits to make money because if nonprofits are not making money, they're not self-sustaining, and we want them to be self-sustaining. So, for example, the NCAA, like basketball tournaments and all of that, that's a nonprofit. You know that they are making money hand over fist, right? But as long as they are promoting amateur sports competition as their primary objective, which they are, that is a charitable endeavor. Now, they're probably paying what's known as UBIT, unrelated business income tax, on all of like their promotional deals and advertising revenue and all of that. But they are allowed to do that and still make money as long as they're paying that unrelated business income tax. The key is that most of their activity has to fulfill their charitable purpose. Now, a business that is not primarily charitable and is not making money does not make it a nonprofit. It makes it a bad business idea. And so a lot of times I have artists or arts groups who are like, well, we're forming a co-op, but we're not making money, so we're a charity. And I'm like, no, you just have a bad business model because you're not making money and it's not successful. That doesn't make it charitable. And so, I mean, that's a hard conversation to have. I mean, nobody wants to have that conversation. I don't want to have to tell anybody, hey, it sucks, but the government's not going to give you a hand up for this. They're just going to be like, whatever, you're a for-profit and you're not charitable. It sucks that you're not making money, but And no artist wants to hear that either, that their business idea is not functional to be successful. But that is where we're making those decisions about whether or not you're applying for tax exempt status, because I don't want to have you spend the money to apply for tax exempt status if I know it's going to fail. If I know that the IRS is going to look at this and they're going to go, that's not charitable. You just have literally paid them $200, $300, $400, up to $800 sometimes, to just have them be like, okay, thanks. We kept your $800. No, we're not giving you tax exempt status. So I want to have those conversations up front and only apply for tax exempt status if I feel like there's a very high degree of likelihood that it's going to be accepted and that you're going to actually be granted tax exempt status. So when you guys are looking at your organization and you're thinking about applying for tax exempt status, one of the ways, if you're looking at it now and you're going, I don't know, it feels like our primary purpose is to sell works of art, not to promote arts and culture. There are ways to kind of move around that and think about how to change the format of what you're doing to make it more charitable. So for example, the Kansas City Artists Coalition sells works of art. It's not a situation where they've never sold a work of art from the Kansas City Artists Coalition. But the Kansas City Artists Coalition is a nonprofit and they're tax exempt because their primary mission, and that's with their programming and with the way that they run the gallery and everything, is to promote arts and culture in the environment and community that they're in. Even though they occasionally sell works of art, if that makes sense. So sometimes when I have an artist or an arts group that's kind of in the middle on this, and they're kind of like, oh, we're kind of not, the first question I ask them is, I go, what is your ultimate goal here? If your ultimate goal is to make money, then you're probably really needing to go move all of your stuff towards a for-profit direction. If your ultimate goal is promote arts and culture, but you're kind of in the, I'm looking more like a for-profit than a non-profit the way I'm doing it, then your goal is you need to start moving your programming towards it being more of a nonprofit sort of endeavor, if that makes sense. Okay. I got a thumbs up.
And actually, after listening to you about the primary focus, it's like, well, yeah, that is our goal, is to promote photographic arts in Kansas City and to be able to get visibility for the caliber of the photographic artists that we have, because there's a lot of artists that don't get the recognition that they need. Our primary focus is not to sell the work, it's to show the work and get the work out there.
Right, and so when you're drafting your tax exempt application, you're going to have to really put that information into a way that convinces the IRS that your primary purpose is to do something charitable. Right. One of the ways that I look at this is that the IRS, you're basically sending your application into somebody who's sitting at a desk 8 to 10 hours a day, who's getting paid maybe $15 to $17 an hour to do nothing but review tax exempt applications all day long. And so the more that you can make your application so incredibly obvious that you're charitable, so that they can spend 2 minutes looking at it and then go, oh yeah, clearly charitable, accepted, the better chance you have of it actually going through and getting accepted. If they've got to look at it and go, I don't know if this is charitable, you don't ever want to be in that place. You want to be in the place that the second that they look at it, it's so freaking obvious that you're charitable that they don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that you can maybe figure that out is that find other organizations across the country that are doing similar things to you. If they are nonprofits, contact them you're not going to be in competition with them if they're not in the same region, right? I mean, if it's a gallery out in California, they probably don't care about a gallery in Kansas City. And see, like, you know, ask them, you know, what kind of programming do you do? How are you promoting this as a charitable endeavor? And if they're not willing to talk to you about that, a lot of that might be evident just by looking at their website or their Facebook pages and seeing what it is they're doing and what they're promoting. The other thing is that nonprofits are public entities and have a high level of required disclosure. And so websites like, it used to be GuideStar, they've been rebranded. I can never remember the new website's name, but I'm sure if you Google GuideStar, it'll tell you what the new website is. You can look up those nonprofits on GuideStar, and especially a lot of the larger ones, they will actually have copies of their 990s up there or their 1023s where they applied for tax exempt status, and you can see exactly what they wrote that got them approved for tax exempt status. And so, you know, if in your research you discover that most of the people that are doing the things that you want to do are for profit, that's also a sign to you that what you're trying to do is probably not charitable. Right. But if what most of them that are doing that you find are doing the same thing as you are nonprofit, then that tells you that you have a better chance of success, that you might be able to have a nonprofit application successfully go through.
Okay. All right, well, I think I took up a lot of your time. I feel like
you took up
the meeting.
You only took up 12 minutes, so I don't think that's really that much time.
I want to chime in and say thank you so much, because I feel like, you know, I'm interested in this for more than just one, you know, organization and and all that. So I really appreciate your help with this. It's awesome. We'll make an appointment too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you guys making an appointment might be helpful for you, because you could bring things like, here's kind of a description of the things that we're doing, and here's this and here's that, and that may give me the ability to really kind of flesh some of these details out with you.
Oh, I like that.
And, you know, see where it goes. And I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I've got no reason to lie to you. So, I mean, if I feel like it's something that I'm like, this is, I will be completely, honesty is maybe my best and worst quality. I don't have a great filter. I will be completely honest and be like, yeah, there's no way this is ever getting through the IRS like this. This is a for-profit.
Yeah, that's perfect. That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
I like brutal honesty. So.
Does anybody
has a question?
Okay. Switching chairs.
Yeah. So switching hats real quick. I've kind of, as an artist, moved from the world of like craft and art fairs, pop-ups, very straightforward monetary transactions, like understanding how that worked on the accounting side, into doing more like public art, larger commissions, things where I'm getting W-9s, like big, filling out W-9s and stuff like that. I'm wondering if you have any just accounting advice on how I should be budgeting or managing for paying my taxes at the end of the year. Like if I have, you know, $10,000 in public art that I've done over the year, should I be putting that money aside to pay my taxes at the end of the year? Like, what's your advice for that?
So anytime you are doing work in which you are not being employed by a W-2 employer, so if you're not going to get a W-2, but you're going to get a 1099,
yeah,
whatever work that is, for the 1099 work, you are considered both the employer and the employee. So when I go do my day jobs at UMKC or KCVLAA, that they're both W-2 employers. So they're withholding taxes on me. And then I'm supposed to pay taxes to the government as well. And I usually have it set up where they're paying enough taxes for me that I end up not having to pay the government. But if they aren't withholding enough taxes for me, then I have to pay the government as well. When you are getting 1099 work, you are both the employer and the employee. So you are supposed to be paying both what the employer would have paid on your behalf and what you have paid. So instead of being the like 6 or 7-ish% that you pay when you're a W-2 employee, as a 1099 employee, a 1099 contractor, you're paying the full 15.3%.
Okay, so I should keep
So-
in my mind, like keep 15.3% out of this lump of what I'm getting paid for this project.
Yes,
Like reserve that.
yes. If you are disciplined enough and can swing it, that would be the best way you could do it. Most people who do any sort of contract work pay estimated taxes. So they'll pay it quarterly. Some of my contractors who don't technically make enough money that they have to do estimated taxes, because the IRS says, well, and the state taxing authorities, if you have reached a threshold where you owe them so much money in April, but you didn't pay estimated taxes, they charge you a penalty for not doing that.
Mm.
But I have some artists that are not actually going to make enough money that they're going to hit that penalty, but they go ahead and pay estimated taxes anyway, because for them, they're like, if I just only have to set that 15.3% aside for 3 months and then I send it to the taxing authorities, that is way easier for me than to try to make sure I don't spend that for 11 and a half months and then send it, right? And so some of my artists will pay estimated taxes, even though there is no requirement for them to do so, because it is easier for them from a budgeting standpoint to just be like, I have sent my tithe to the government and now I'm going to move forward. So I try to tell any artists that are doing work that's not W-2 work that every time you are paid, if you can swing it, try to set roughly 15% of that aside. If you need to pull it out in cash and put it in an envelope and shove it under your mattress, or you need to have a separate account that you put it in, whatever's going to work best for you. Anytime someone's like, well, what accounting method should I use? I'm like, the one that you're actually going to use. That's what you need to use, is the one you're actually going to use. Because I could be like, well, I like to use QuickBooks, but if you get into QuickBooks and you hate it and you won't use it, well, that is a failure. Like, you're not going to have an accounting system. And if you're like, I like the envelope system, I'd be like, great. If you can do the envelope system and you'll do it, do it. So whatever you need to do to set that money aside every time you're paid as a non-W-2 employee, that is your ultimate goal. Now, you're not always going to reach that goal, right? I mean, sometimes, especially since, artists are not always employed in regular day jobs, you might have times where you get paid and all of that money is going to your living expenses. You can't set 15% aside because you would like to eat this month, right? And so that 15% is your ultimate goal. That's what you're aiming for. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you should subsist on saltine crackers and ramen noodles just to make that work.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, that seems simple enough. And I'm glad I have that like percent in my mind now, because I was kind of really lost on like, how much do I set aside? How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, it might end up, it's easier to tell if you start having consistent work over a period of time, because then you can look back and go, okay, I roughly make X amount of dollars each year, not on W-2 work, and I roughly spend X amount of dollars. So at the end of the year, my net, what I'm actually making is this, and that's what you're taxed on, is on your net. You're not really taxed on your gross. So the first couple of years that you're setting that 15% aside and paying it, it may be that you're going to end up getting, especially if you're doing estimated, it may end up that you're getting a big refund. But you can kind of adjust that as anything becomes any more consistency. You can kind of adjust that and get a better sense of what you should be doing. But I mean, even as a W-2 employee, like anytime I have any sort of life change, like you add a kid or your mortgage, you take on a different mortgage or anything, all of that is something that I have to kind of guess. Even as a tax professional, I still have to kind of guess about where things are going to end up at the end of the year and kind of hope that I'm doing it right. But I kind of don't know until I start to see a bigger pattern. And then I can plan based on that bigger pattern.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes
And
sense.
I usually err on the side of, for small business owners and artists, like, I usually err on the side of giving, even though I hate the idea of the government. I hate the idea of big refunds because you've essentially let the government have your money for a year interest free. And so I hate that. But I prefer that situation over the situation that I see much more frequently, which is I have artists that don't hold that back, don't pay those estimated taxes. They go file their taxes in April, and then they are coming to me in a panic because they're like, the IRS says I owe them $14,000 and I don't have that.
Right.
And I would,
don't want to get myself in that position where I'm like,
Yes.
oh, now I've blown this money and I'm like, in a
Yes.
pickle.
and the largest amount of tax controversies in the United States, and when I say tax controversy, those words are the words that means the IRS is after you for money. Like 90+% of them are people that were not employed, they were contractors, and they failed to pay their self-employment taxes, that 15%. Like that's like 90% of controversy work.
I bet. One of our guests was asking, is there income tax tied to those scenarios?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's 15% in addition to your regular income tax rate, right?
So you're paying income on all of the income that you took in, but then you're also paying your self-employment tax as a self-employed individual. So you basically have to do your Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid withholdings that your employer normally would have done. You are going to have to pay those to the government as your self-employment tax to have those same withholdings done, because it's your way of paying into the system that may or may not actually support us when we retire. But it's, even as a self-employed individual, you have to pay into that system. That's the way our tax structure is set up.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, great. Well, I just, we are currently over time a little bit, 8 minutes
Okay.
plus 11. So I just want to be mindful of that and see if there's any last minute questions that any of our guests have this morning. Just unmute yourself. Please feel free while Danny's here. And if not, definitely follow her link and sign up for her session. That's next Thursday, the 19th. Try to get one of those slots that she still has open and just stay in touch with her organization, get a membership. Like, this kind of information is seriously invaluable. So,
And if August doesn't work, we do it in September, we do it in October, we do it in November. So you can, and the links for all of that are already up. So you can sign up months in advance. It's not a thing where if you got to wait. We just ask, if you aren't going to make your appointment, to please cancel it. Don't just leave us hanging thinking that you're going to show up and then you don't.
yes, please be considerate. It's very nice. Well, thank you so much again, Danny. We love the partnership we have with you, and hopefully, at some point in the future, we'll be able to be in person again, but this works just as well. Thanks for giving your time.
Yeah, have a great afternoon.
Yeah, everyone take care, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.